So, good morning, everyone. Good morning to the second day of our conference, Missions for Sustainability, New Approaches for Science and Society. My name is Katharina Hauming. I'm part of the team of the Research Network's Mission and Knowledge for Sustainable Development, and I'm agronomist from the Leibniz Center for Agricultural Landscape Research, and I have the pleasure to moderate you through the day today with the keynote speech of Philippe Larrue from OECD. So it's the second day today. Yesterday we were talking about designing missions for sustainable development and for innovation, and today it's more about implementation of the missions. So yesterday I think we already had learned a lot with the very intriguing keynote speech given by Lea Fünfschilling about the difference and mismatch between innovation and change. And maybe from a resilience perspective, I can translate it into maybe adaptation versus transformation, which I found very inspiring. Then we had 5 very interesting parallel sessions. 3 of them theme-oriented, bioeconomy and agriculture, sea and ocean, and the hydrogen economy. And we learned about the combination and interaction between excellence and relevance in research, and about the role of education for improving knowledge for sustainable development. And then finally, we had a very interesting panel with Lea Fünfschilling, Uwe Kantner, Dietrich Nelle, and Rainer Wertz on how to formulate a mission and the role of participation in formulating and designing missions, the necessity for openness, transparency, and the challenge of dealing with uncertainty related to the missions. So today we come into the implementation and the challenges to implementation. And after the nice keynote speech, we have again parallel sessions, and finally, after the lunch break at 1 o'clock, we have a final panel discussion. So let's come to Philippe Larrue. Philippe is policy analyst at the Directorate for Science, Technology and Innovation at OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. He's working there since 11 years, he told me, formerly working on more in the development context. And Philippe currently manages several projects in relation to innovation policy to address societal challenges, and also the study into the design and implementation of mission-oriented innovation policy. The acronym is MOIPS, or MOIPS, and I think it's a very instructive document you can find in the net. Very interesting. And Philippe is also leading a project on the role of research and technology organizations for sustainable transitions. He regularly leads or contributes to OECD innovation policy reviews for Malaysia, Sweden, Kazakhstan, Norway, Portugal, Kuwait, and South Korea. And he chairs the Strategic Advisory Board of the European Forum for Studies of Policies for Research and Innovation. He's in very close contact with the German BMBF on the analysis of innovation policies, and of course also with the European Commission on the new mission in the Horizon Europe Framework Program. So Philippe will talk about the challenges and opportunities of mission-oriented policies to achieve net zero. It's your turn, Philippe. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you all. Thank you to the organizers for inviting me. It's been indeed a very insightful day yesterday, and I'm pretty sure today is going to be just the same. So again, thank you very much. I will tell you today and try to synthesize a bit about the work that we've been undertaking at OECD, at the Science and Technology and Innovation Directorate on mission-oriented innovation policy since 2019, when we started under the purview of the Committee on Science and Technology Policy. So what we've done when we started this work on MYPs was to, of course, try to understand what they are, look a little bit everywhere, scan through the policy landscapes of different countries worldwide and try to see what corresponds to that definition, what different types. So we've done a lot of definition, design principles, typology. We've done, of course, we put online a huge evidence base on plenty of cases of mission-oriented innovation policy that we have analyzed systematically through some analytical framework that we designed purposively for this. So I will tell you about all that, and I will tell you about a bit higher level type of reflections on the challenges and opportunities, knowing that, of course, they are all this, and this is even the beauty of mission-oriented innovation policy, is that it's all specific for a specific challenge. So all missions are a little word in themselves. So they are very specific. But we can still extract some challenges and opportunities from a generic level or higher level. And then I will tell you a bit about what we call mission-oriented innovation policy national trajectories, since all these things are very embedded in national innovation systems, so they're very also specific to specific countries, and they evolve as they unfold. So I will tell you about this. The definition, I will go quick because I know that now we are all well acquainted with that, and I think we share the same understanding. We consider a mission-oriented innovation policy as a coordinated package of regulatory, policy, funding measures, also qualitative networking, platform measures, and all that is tailor-made to mobilize science, technology, and innovation to address societal challenge. And if we want to go a bit further, there are some specific features that we would expect from a mission-oriented innovation policy. First, it's directed toward clear and ambitious goals to be met in a defined time frame. They should cut across different silos, be they disciplinary, sectoral silos, but also, as we heard yesterday a lot, administrative silos between different ministries, different agencies, between different levels of governance, and all that. They use different instruments, top-down, bottom-up, etc. So all that you know, and you can see that in this definition, there is three main dimensions, of course. In fact, the dimension of strategic orientation, this is the head, what you define as the objective, the mission statement, the strategic agenda, the coordination, how you align the plans of actors, and of course, it always comes down to implementation. What is the policy package itself, the instruments, the funding instruments, etc. The people you put and the functions you really apply to really implement the activities. And you might tell me, nothing of these different features are new. When you look, and we've done, as you said, many innovation policy reviews, and every time we found strategies, we found too many strategies. There is a lot of roadmap strategies for hydrogen, and that's not new. That was 20 years ago. My PhD was about electric vehicles. I was diving into strategies of all countries for electric vehicles. Coordination, there are many committees for net zero, for green growth, for everything. So committees, working groups, governance, cross-coordination. Same, implementation, you have in all countries, you have large-scale cross-ministerial programs. So what's new about mission-oriented innovation policy? Well, what is new is that it integrates all that into one package. So it's really a specific co-created agenda. Associated to it, you have a dedicated structure of agenda of governance to align the plans of actors toward these goals that have been co-created. And of course, in the end, you have a tailor-made package that is really specifically designed to implement the objectives according to what has been agreed in the coordination. So that is, of course, in principles. When you go on the ground, you will see that not all of the mission-oriented innovation policy tick all boxes. So what is really important is to consider a mission-oriented policy as what we call a meso or mini meso system of innovation in itself. When I say it's a small word, it's a word in itself. This is what it means. You have a challenge, you convert that into a mission, and then you try to get all actors around to align their plans and commit resources, and then also bring with them their policy instruments and means of intervention. So really, you have to consider mission-oriented policy as something that enables collective action. The key word is collective action. And the collective action dimension, the collective action side, you will find it in the 3 dimensions. First, in the co-creation of the mission, then in this dedicated structure of governance, and of course, then in this intentional policy mix. And here, the key word is intentional. Policy mix has been studied a lot in the literature on economics of innovation and sociology of innovation, but these were kind of emerging policy mix. It means that you look in a landscape, the different instruments, and you look at the synergies between the different instruments. Here it's different. You purposively design a package of instruments for addressing a challenge and meeting the objectives that you have set collectively. Now, typology, this definition with those expected features, as you can tell, leave quite some margin for variation around. What I have defined here is what we call an ideal type in the Weberian type, in the Weberian sense. It's an ideal type of mission-oriented innovation policy, and reality revolve around these ideal types, and you find different types, because not all of them, as I said, tick all boxes. Some of them are, well, don't even have a mission statement. Some of them have a mission statement, but the coordination structure is pretty loose, et cetera, et cetera. So you find a lot of, and there are different ways of doing cross-ministerial governance and all that. So, so we have identified 3 types. The first type is the one that you know best, because that's the one that is most Matsukato compatible, I would say, in the sense that it's more or less resemble what she has put forward in her seminal work for the European Commission. You remember the graphs where you have these missions that are set, national missions or EU missions that are set at the highest level of a system of innovation. And you say, okay, the country, Norway, wants to, achieve, I don't know, net zero hydrogen or green ships, etc. And then you try to gather all the part of the system of innovation that is relevant to that challenge with a dedicated structure of governance and all this. And here of course, the EU missions are part of that type, I would say. The Dutch mission-driven top sectors as well, and even the 12 missions of the high-tech strategy in Germany. And here the risk and challenge are that of mission dilution, meaning that if you try to gather as many actors as possible in a system of innovation around one challenge, then you have to negotiate the goals and objectives, and you kind of, reduce the level of ambitions, and the objectives become a bit broader, vague, to try to accommodate the different interests of different people. So it's mission dilution. It's often, and this is what we see for the high-tech strategy in Germany, although it's different according to the 12 missions, but in most cases, those missions are large umbrella, meaning that it's just a big package where you put different existing activities and initiatives and programs, and the coordination is pretty loose. I don't say it's negative, but it's one of the characteristics, and in terms of what you can do in terms of collective action, if the coordination is pretty loose, then you don't have the same strengths. What do I have? Mission inflation. Sorry, I don't see well. Mission inflation is the fact that, of course, the Dutch have 25 missions. Is it too many? Numbers are relative, but still, you can wonder. So then the second type is set at the level of agency. It's much more implementation level. Thank you very much. So, and this is what we call the challenge-based programs and schemes. For instance, we have that in Norway, Pilot E, which has been declined then in Pilot T, etc. I will tell you a bit about that. The Future Innovator Prizes implemented by Science Foundation Ireland, where they really try to set the research program in a challenge-based framework with a prominence of societal challenges, objectives, etc. Here the risk is that you can do something, so it's more focused projects, challenge-led, but the problem is that you get some local success, some niche innovation. The whole issue is how you scale up. You end up with maybe some great success, but, and this is one of the questions of the panel this afternoon, how do you scale up? The connection between what you try to do in this challenge-led initiative is to coordinate the different policy instruments across the whole innovation chain, from research down to demonstration and even market launch, take-up, etc. So here, how you connect the supply of knowledge innovation and the demand for innovation and knowledge. That is key. And having to, we will see with Pilot E in the example, but the hinge is very complicated to do. Thematic mission-oriented programs, this is a specific type where in many countries you would find, you find different thematic research programs. And here the idea is to try to make them more mission-oriented. So you start from existing thematic programs and you try to make them better coordinated, better targeted. Here the problem is that it's very much continuous, which is one of the advantages. But at the same time, there is little impulse for change and it goes pretty slow, and the intensity of the mission orientation, if I can put it that way, is pretty limited. The fourth type and last and not least is really those ecosystem-based mission programs where that we find mainly in Scandinavia, in the Nordic countries, the vision-driven innovation in Sweden, but also a strategic innovation program in Sweden, the growth engines in Finland, where the concept is to delegate the task of designing the strategic agenda to ecosystem of actors, established or emerging, and then to select some of them and support their implementation. Of course, in this type of approach, the risk is that of capture by powerful actors, leading firms or leading research institutes, etc., in a specific challenge area. Now, 3 examples that correspond to the 3 main types. Mission-driven top sector, I'll try to go quick. You know that, it was initiated in 2011. You have a sectoral organization. There were 11 at the start, I think, and each of them used to have their own strategic agenda for research and innovation, and that was a great tool to enter into a dialogue with also the government and try to say one sector could say what they need, what are the challenges, and etc. So now in 2018 they've done this reform. They made it mission driven, as they say, meaning that now they say, okay, for societal challenges we cannot rely only on sectoral strategies. We need more cross-sectoral cooperation, coordination, etc. So they asked the different top sectors to work together to design specific strategic agenda on which they can agree to address 4 big challenges, and within those 4 societal challenges, they have set 25 missions, and within each of the missions, they even went further. They have MMIPs, what they call mission-driven innovation programs, where they really set the very specific action plans that are really negotiating between those different sectors and the stakeholders in a very kind of elaborated structure of governance with research, with industry, with even different layers, regional and national. So that is really, that has a lot of engagement and of different actors because they contribute to the definition of that. Pilot E in Norway, so that is the challenge-based program schemes type, launched in 2016, mainly in the area of zero and low emission technology and vehicles, mainly shipbuilding, but there is also other types of vehicles. And the key here is that 3 agencies, the research agency, the innovation agency, and the energy market agency, to put it that way, have teamed together, created that integrated scheme that provide like a funnel approach for projects to go from research down to innovation to demonstration, and even using public procurement to that, so that the boats, the electric or electric ferries or high fuel cell ferries, actually see are put in use. So that's really what is really interesting. And there is, again, a dedicated structure of governance they rely on the different experts from the different agencies and stakeholders. They select the project together, they monitor the project, etc. And they try to provide that seamless as possible journey throughout the policy landscape. So that's really interesting. And of course, doing that, they can fund projects of larger size. That is also another thing. When you pool resources, you have more resources and you focus on some consortia of bigger type. Strategic innovation programs, that is the ecosystem-based mission programs, launched in 2012, so we have some experience with this one. And as I said, it's a two-step process. First, there is a call for roadmaps for strategic innovation agendas. So different emerging ecosystems are going to coalesce, to assemble, to get together and submit proposal for strategic innovation agendas. They're going to be selected. They do their strategic agendas. And at the end, second step, the Vinova and the different agencies that are involved in that, but it's mainly Vinova, will select some of these agendas and say, okay, we are ready to bet on this one and help you implement that. And so they structure the ecosystem. They provide funding for structuring the ecosystem and implementing actions in line with the strategic agenda that has been done. So again, a lot of engagement as far because the different ecosystem actors have been part of developing the agenda. And you have, I think, now something like 16 or 17 of them. And they've been evaluated on the website of Vinova. You can see the evaluation, which is pretty positive. And what is interesting also is that it has evolved. It has evolved because it was mainly driven toward competitiveness, and it was a bit more defensive than proactive, pro-sustainability transition, and it's evolving. And in the last calls, the new layers of strategic innovation program are much more, I wouldn't say transformative, but a bit more societal, a bit more geared toward societal challenges. Challenges and opportunities. About don't worry, we won't go through that. Just to let you know what we are doing right now. About the opportunities, what we are doing, we're doing this study on mission-oriented innovation policy for net zero. So we do a study only on net zero missions. We have selected something like now 60 missions that are addressing this issue of reducing CO2 emissions one way or another. And what we try to do, we have designed this MYP theory of change, where we go from these design principles to the impact that we would expect those missions to be able to produce. And then we do interviews and we do a lot of desk review to try to understand and try to check whether these causal pathways, impact pathways, we can see anything on that, happening really on that, and what are the enabling factors and what, of course, are the hindering factors. So that will be released in this autumn. In terms of challenges, I can provide you more on challenges than opportunities today, but we learn a lot from challenges. So about in this strategic orientation dimension, the first question, the first challenge is how systemic, how transformative. It's true that most MOIPs pick problems and not solutions, as Matsukato used to say. But when you look in the details of what they select in the end, what are the activities, it's mainly technological. So many of those missions are not that systemic. And we know that for transformation, for transition, we would need that they would encompass a much broader scope, including social innovation and the behavioral, the societal dimension, behavioral change. And so that is not really happening for a good reason, is that if you look who is behind, as we said yesterday, we discussed with Leah, is the fact that the research and innovation actors are the one leading those activities. So it's research and innovation money, it's research and innovation actors, so it goes mainly and naturally toward research and innovation activities. So they look where they have competencies and money to do something. How many are real missions? When you look really, in fact, very few initiatives tick all the boxes. You know, those objectives need to be, you need a mission statement with bold objectives, targeted, measurable, etc., time-bound. Not many of that happen. There is a lot of mission washing, as we say, a lot of mission dilution, as I explained. I don't want to say, but one of the 12 missions of the high-tech strategy in Germany is, I think, set up a battery manufacturing capacity. Well, that was, they didn't, governments in France or in Germany didn't, wait for the mission approach to set that type of industrial policy goals. I have nothing against it, but it's just not a mission. So you try to wrap that up in a mission little paper, gift. Well, that's nice. What definition process? Usually you would expect that there is a nice mission statement at the start, and then you start declining and getting toward implementation, everybody's inspired by the mission. That's not really the way it works. Not many mission-oriented policy really have a clear mission statements at the start, and the targets are not set at the start. Usually you start with a broad challenge area, and then the targets are specified bottom-up by the actors during the call for proposal. So you see, and that resembles a little bit what was happening before. So we are still in a transition period. The challenge-led aspect is not always there. It's still pretty much bottom-up, and the targets happen during the course of the project. They are specified further in the course of the project. Not always a problem, but it's not exactly how we would expect that to happen. What scope and granularity? This is really essential, and this is a question that countries keep on asking us. If we start a mission-oriented innovation policy, what should be the mission? Should it be, fighting climate change or reducing CO2 emissions? Should it be reducing CO2 emission in industry? Should it be in industry through CCS, carbon storage? Where do I start? Of course, this is complicated. It's a negotiation process, and especially it should be adapted to the capacity and the specific advantage of each country. There is not a silver bullet. I don't have an equation that gives you exactly where you should position yourself in this arborescence, in this tree of problems, But still, it's a question of finding the right space. What definition process we've seen. Now coordination, what cost and benefits, what are the costs and benefits? There are costs, transaction costs associated to this very elaborated structure of governance. The Dutch top sectors, there is really many different, because you have this sectoral dynamic, you have the cross-sectoral mission dynamics. They also have a strategic agenda for key enabling technology. So there is a lot. That means many meetings, to put it bluntly. And so there is what they say a bit of mission fatigue. It's too many. You have the impression that you spend your time coordinating. Everything has to be coordinated. And so here it's a question of balance and trying to find the right, to strike the right balance is not always easy. Where to anchor the mission? I would like to insist on that. This is very, very, very important. As I said, it's still driven by the STI public bodies. It's usually Ministry of Innovation, Ministry of Research, depending on the portfolio. In different countries that have been the pioneer and it came from here, but it's the glass ceiling. At some point, how do you reach that point where there is so much you can do with only research and innovation authorities there, and trying to invite, of course, the sectoral ministries, but they usually have a small seat because it's still associated. If you take Norway, for instance, they try to embed their national missions now within their long-term plans for higher education and research. But this is still associated at the Ministry of Research strategy, although they claim, no, it's a cross-government strategy. But the Ministry of Industry says, no, it's your strategy, of course. So you see, and the Ministry of Transport, so I hear, I'm a bit sketchy, but this is what happens, is that is it the right vehicle? Should it be at Prime Minister office? But then Prime Minister office in Norway, it's not very strong. They don't have the capacity. So in Japan, this is possible. This is done at the level of the cabinet office, with the prime minister heading the Committee on Science and Technology and Innovation. So you see different countries. So where to anchor the mission is really, really essential. Should it be a cross-government platform? Should it be a cross-agency platform? Should it be, they have also some industry platform. Could it be a super industry platform that would gather? There are different options. This is very, very interesting and very essential, because that would determine the engagement of also the sectoral ministries and all the actors. How to connect missions to the rest of the policy landscape? This is also a question that we are always asked. What do you do with blue sky research? What do you do with key enabling technology support, with infrastructure? Do you make that, do you put all that in your mission? But then how do you, it's horizontal, it's transversal, it's not vertical as a mission. So how do you do that? So it's the question of the connection, and the balance in terms of funding. Policy implementation, how to implement portfolio management. This is also this is one of the key features that we expect from mission-oriented policy, is that having this systemic and holistic view on innovation, you're going to be able to consider not what we used to do before in many cases, deal project by project. Here you try to understand project not only, and you select project not only on the basis of their intrinsic merits, but also excellence, relevance, those criteria that we used and discussed yesterday, but also you're going to add another dimension, which is the portfolio fit. To what extent a project fit is consistent with a portfolio of activities in the sense of how together they are going to, in a combined way, they are going to try to achieve the objective of the mission. So, and how do you do that? It's easy to say it, but then it means what should be the selection criteria? How do you manage the knowledge flows between the different projects, knowing that some of them are with competitors or alternatives, some of them are complementary, some of them are alternatives. So that is very, and that changed the mindset of people. I was talking with people from the European Commission. They've not been used to that. So how do you manage a portfolio of projects? This is the DARPA style. So maybe in the US and some agencies, they are now more used to do that, but in some places they are not. Some agencies are not ready. They don't have the public sector capacity for that and the resources because it takes a lot. You need hands-on interactions with the project people. How to evaluate the additionality of mission? This is really what is happening now. Many countries, and including OECD, we are very hot on that. Should we evaluate mission? Knowing that often a mission is an additional layer of coordination on existing instruments. So how are you going to capture in evaluation that systemic dimension, that holistic dimension? How to practically connect the supply side and demand side of policy instruments. If you take the example of Norway, it's 3 different agencies. 3 different agencies is 3 different IT systems. It's 3 different processes and mechanisms for reporting on projects. They don't have the same format for reports. How do you bring all that together? That seems a bit too practical, but this is, in the end, in daily activity of collective action, this is also where things fail sometimes. So I think I have almost exhausted my time, so I won't go too far into that. Just to say that, of course, you have to consider also that I presented types and challenges just like they would be here and unmovable. In fact, all that is changing a lot. We are still in a very early phase. It's really in the missions are still in their infancy. There is a lot of learning. There is a lot of evolution. We see countries changing their approach to mission orientation. And those missions are ready, as I said, since they are an additional layer, of course, often on existing instruments, they are really deeply embedded in this national institutional setting. They rely on these institutions that are already here. It's not like a revolution. It's more an additional layer of coordination. So, and since there is this specificity and since there is a lot of learning, in fact, you can define country trajectories of missions. How do they evolve? And it depends of where they from where they start. So you can see different types of mission orientation in different countries. As I said, in Japan, Korea, it's much more led by the center of government, cabinet office, and here their challenge is that of how to streamline, how to engage sectoral ministries, and even the Ministry of Research that can feel that they've been a bit put aside. So how do you really keep the commitment for those like Germany who have set those broad national missions? The question is, how do you try to increase the level of integration? And we heard yesterday with Dietrich Neal that they might be now, and the coalition has given some kind of mandate for that, maybe try to strengthen a little bit this mission-oriented approach, including making the coordination maybe a bit less loose, a bit more integrated, a bit stronger. For countries like Austria and France, there are other challenges. Bottom-up and agency-led initiative, like, as I said, in the Scandinavian countries, for them, one of the issues is now how to level up those missions. They started with missions at the level of agency, and we see that Norway and Sweden are trying to bring that higher in the system. So I won't go into that, but these are different trajectories that we have identified and that basically describe what I've said before. And just to let you know that we have at OECD done this Mission Action Lab, which is a structure that gathers the capacity and expertise of different directorates in missions, and we bring that to the we try to support the implementation of mission-oriented innovation policy in different countries, organizations, initiatives. And I thank you very much for your attention.
Yeah, thank you very much, Philippe, for this extremely inspiring talk. What I liked most is really the combination of theory, well-grounded theory, with real-world examples and also some practical hiccups. So my favorite was how to avoid too many meetings when designing and implementing a mission. I think that is a very interesting question. But we do not go into detail with that. The floor is open for questions and comments. We start with the small but nice audience here in the room, and then we go to the online audience. Lea.
Thank you, Philippe. Two questions. The first one is regarding your experience with the different missions. I mean, you have seen so many. Have you seen a case where an agency or a public government of any sort, like taking up the mission approach, has actually transformed their organizational model? Or have you seen that they came to realize that they might need a different governance style or governance mode in order to realize the mission, and therefore have done that? Or is it usually just stopping by saying, well, we need a different type of government, so we abort the mission? And the second question is, I'm a bit curious about your take on how much uncertainty a mission can embed. So how much is, because sometimes I think like a mission, it makes sense if you have already decided where you want to go. But in a lot of transitions, we don't really know what the end result is. So how much can we have uncertainty and still have directionality and a mission? Are these exclusive, or do you see a way to have that type of flexible governance within a mission approach? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So about the first one, yes. For instance, we had this week some discussion with Business Finland, and they made it clear that often what they do, those mission-oriented policy initiatives, are coming in an organization and they set up a very nice initiative that tick many of the boxes with a lot of policy innovation and things like that. But the organization remains the same, meaning that this is really when we look, it's not only about mission-oriented policy, when we look at policy change, we see that there is the structure of the organization is always what changed last. I mean, you need to change the structure of incentives and all that. And they made it clear, no, we created that and we didn't change. We evolved, the programs evolved, but we didn't change the organization, meaning that they didn't change the selection criteria. It became more mission-oriented, the growth engines, but they didn't, even in the selection criteria, sustainability was not part of that. And the mindsets of people. So just to say that now they totally acknowledge that, and you see, they have learned the hard way, maybe, I don't know. And now they are trying to change that, so they have ongoing reflection to change their evaluation framework, which will include also the selection and all that. Portfolio management, same thing. They not only them, but the EU are now, they understand that portfolio management is not only a nice word, it means additional resources, it means different ways of doing things, it means different selection criteria. So that also, RCN in Norway, Research Council of Norway, same. They have understood that if they want to be more, to really participate more into this mission-oriented policy dynamic, they need to change also the way they manage their programs, not program by program. So now they have a new structure. They have reorganized everything in terms of portfolio. So so you see, they change their organization. But it's true that often what happens is that you create a mission team, a bit in levitation in the organization, and they are seen a bit like the aliens or the nice trendy, the last trendy stuff. it takes time. Again, we are at a very early stage. I think things are changing, but so that give me the opportunity to say that one of the key issues here is really also look at what needs to be changed within the organization, the mindset, the structure of incentive. If you don't have your staff evaluated or reporting only vertically and never reporting toward the mission, yeah, you have an issue. They won't contribute. Uncertainty, I don't have a clear response to that. Usually, in principle, again, you set the problems, you don't set the solution. So the solution that you don't know today won't be mobilized now, but might come later. I know that I don't have an example now, but I remember that some initiatives, they set this strategic innovation agenda, and then they try to build what we call a mechanism for surprise, meaning that you leave some room for something a bit more new and open and not yet determined. That's all I know. But it's again, you have to strike the balance, not be too top-down, and be flexible, be open for new things to come in the programs.
Good. I think Mark Wolfram is next. You have a microphone?
Yeah, thank you, Philip, for your very insightful presentation. Taking apart the questions and limitations of missions that we discussed yesterday in terms of co-creation processes and also what you mentioned, systemic orientation, I was wondering if you look at the typology that you presented and these strengths, weaknesses, opportunities that you outlined that each of them has, there is a strong complementarity recognizable. So it seems to be actually quite a promising idea to rather connect and combine these different types of missions in order to achieve the final goal. However, talking about portfolios, this is usually only one certain type, yeah? Also within a given country. So what about thinking about missions rather as a fabric of a variety of portfolios and actually combining these different types of mission approaches as actually a requisite for achieving what missions aim to achieve, which is systemic change, in terms of requisite variety, because you need these different types and their particular strengths and opportunities.
Thank you very much. This is indeed very relevant, and we've been working exactly on that. We've done a study for Lithuania, try to understand, because they're starting from nothing in terms of missions, and we were wondering what they could do, and we systematically generated different options. And then we started looking at the combination and the complementarities between those different types. And indeed, we see a clear, we make a distinction between the ascending type and the descending type, not to say top-down and bottom-up. So the descending type are the overarching, the national missions, and the ascending is more the ecosystem-based, which are a bit more bottom-up, as you can imagine. And so indeed, we see a clear complementarity where the ecosystems can deliver projects that that contribute to the national mission. So we've been looking into that, and absolutely we should consider these different mission approaches as complementary. And if you pushing it a bit, or maybe you will tell me what you think about that, but I was sometimes thinking about what is the future of mission-oriented innovation policy. We've seen other policy innovation like that coming, you know, this thing about the clusters. There was a time everybody was talking about clusters. Today it's mission-oriented innovation policy, and clusters have good points as well, and the mission-oriented innovation policy have strong points, of course. So my guess would be some mainstreaming and dilution, because when you look at what mission-oriented innovation policy is, it's a lot of good practices. I mean, again, you need measurable goals. You need to get everybody around to fulfill the goals, etc. It's a lot of almost common wisdom in the policy sense. So I think these type of practices will dilute and mainstream in the policy. They will be embedded in the structure and in the mindsets of people in maybe 20 years. And we won't be talking that much about mission-oriented. And it will be, so just to say about your complementarity, we will see a lot of them a bit everywhere without maybe using the name. They will be in thematic program, they will be.
Okay, I would like to encourage also the online community to post questions in the chat, and they will be taken up here. But Heribert Hofer is next.
Thank you very much for your very engaging talk. It's absolutely refreshing and certainly the right thing for early in the morning. I was thinking, given that you have that full arc from theory to a long-term understanding of this, you clearly understand that mission can be useful, but what would you explain to a skeptical parliamentarian who's asked to fund more or approve more money into some sort of mission-oriented program, who simply wants to know, is there a single example out there, there was the fact that something was designed as a mission, that was the reason why it did actually lead to a transformation of whatever was desired?
Well, that would be a very tough question because, again, there is no examples of transformation so far. I don't think you can talk about successes, especially in the type that I mentioned, like Pilot E, that has not now become Pilot T, Pilot H. They are scaling it up. So you find many examples of success. Again, there are green ferries in Norway that have been funded by Pilot E, and but in terms of transformation, those who studied Energiewende in Germany, I'm not sure, nobody mentioned it even in this conference, although we are in the country, and that was the one that was seen 5 years ago. Everybody, when you would talk about mission-oriented innovation policy, people would talk about Energiewende. Today, it's not even mentioned anymore, and that was the transition thing. That was systemic. That was you had those groups, you had those structure of governance. Everything was there. Nobody mentioned it. So I wouldn't say that, but I would say to a parliamentarian that those mission-oriented innovation policy, they have a much more, the political goals, the political will behind is much more visible, and it's much clearer. So they can really associate these interventions to their role, to their functions as politicians, and they can really relate that to their political agenda. So I think there is a much more, the connection is much clearer now between because these are purposive, they are very political. So you can really, they can advocate and they can take credit for it, or for the failure if it fails. But that's
so be assured, we talk about Energiewende every day in Germany.
Oh, you talk
but
about
actually the push is not so much the mission Energiewende, the push is the war. And
the push
is the war.
Oh.
So we have to get rid of the oil and the gas from, from Russia as soon as possible. So it's, how to say, a sudden event that pushes us, which comes from outside, not intentionally.
Yeah, so they have to remain flexible, those mission-oriented innovation policy, to adapt to the new context. Thank you.
Before we move to Achim, I would like to have a question from the chat and ask Markus Egermann.
Yes, thanks. Thanks, Philippe, also from colleagues who follow online, and they thank you for a very comprehensive talk and for a nice overview. And I have, at the moment, 2 questions for you. I start with a shorter one, and that is from Niklashi Yoshi, and she asked if you came across some contradictions and conflicts between missions, and how do agency move forward if you observe these contradictions between missions? And the second question is a quite long one. I think I just read it out. It's from Janus Muir, and he says, many examples you bring out come from countries which scoring high at the EU innovation scoreboard. And at the same time, we can see many new EU member states struggling with developing, mostly implementing effective innovation policies. And it seems that coordination between key stakeholders is one of the key issues, and smart specialization strategies as a condition for receiving EU funds was a step forward in the right direction, as it made many countries think about prioritization, but it was not enough. And now adding sustainability as an additional element in innovation policy will most likely complicate coordination even more. And then the question is, should the European Commission have some kind of a more hands-on approach with the lagging countries to solve these coordination issues? I hope that was clear. It was my summary would be looking into those countries which are already lagging a bit behind in innovation policy. Should the Commission within the missions address them specifically and help them in coordinating things?
I'm going to start by this one. So yes, there is indeed the step is even higher for those countries. Now it becomes even more complicated. As I said yesterday, we used to say to this country, you have to be better at coordinating the authorities in charge of research and those in charge of innovation. We haven't solved that, and now we tell them, oh, no, you need also to involve the Ministry of Transport, Ministry of Environment, etc. So indeed, it's even more complicated for them, but also, let's put it that way, let's be clear, for Germany or France or the UK, who have also clear silos. So yes, the EU should do something, and I'm not here to defend them, but they do it. You know that there is this DG reform program for strengthening capabilities, and for instance, the project that I mentioned on mission-oriented innovation policy in Lithuania was funded by that, and now we have two other ones in Latvia and Slovenia where we deal exactly with that. It's not even mission-oriented innovation policy, it's supporting cross-ministerial coordination and STI governance, and mission is part of that, but it's only a small part. The rest is really about how to strengthen the capacity of this country to coordinate actions across different actors. One thing that is interesting that is happening is that those countries usually rely a lot on structural funds from the EU, of course, and so the whole innovation agenda is led by the smart specialization strategy, and what we see, what is interesting, is that those smart specialization strategies are evolving. You know that the new generation is coming now. We are talking about not S3 anymore, but S4, because it adds the S of sustainability, and even S5. I don't remember what is the fifth S, but you see, it evolves. So they use especially those ecosystem-based approach. Before, the smart specialization strategy was a lot of consultation that would result in priorities, and then basically you allocate the fund by looking at whether the project is in line. You just tick a box. Is it about sea and ocean? Yes, clack, okay, you can get the funding, or provided, of course, other conditions. So now there would be a much more different approach, much more mission-oriented, with the definition of agendas and etc. So it's happening in these countries, and that's pretty interesting. About the contradictions and conflict between missions, I'm sorry, from the top of my head, I don't think about anything. What I know is that in those countries like the Netherlands, where they have a great number of missions, 25, and it becomes so elaborated, the structure of governance, that when we talk with people, they have no clue about what is happening on another mission, because it's a different teams, a different structure of governance, and and even they don't know because it's their boss who was in the meeting. So you see, it becomes very, very much pyramidal and yes, and compartmentalized. So we come to silos between missions. So this is why I would say that the question is very relevant. I'm sorry I didn't find conflicts, but I'm afraid that they're gonna be.
Okay, thank you. Achim Schlüter.
Okay, thanks a lot, Philippe. I can just second what Mr. Hofer was saying. Super inspiring talk on a Friday morning, waking me up. Very good. You were talking about missions, that they're often driven by R&D people, that they're somehow going in the direction of innovations, whatever, which have a market potential and so on. And what are you doing if you're working in the field like I'm doing, whatever, oceans for sustainability and so on, where you would say, okay, the market potential basically is smaller. There are less people from the technology field who are interested in pushing them forward. Would you rather recommend basically to engage on the political realm and say, hey, we need also non-technology or non-market driven innovations, or would you say, hey, I should go the other way around and, for example, engage into issues like blue carbon, where there is a market potential and which you can then, where you can basically build on that momentum?
I'm not sure I have the perfect solution to that. You try to be as systemic as possible. How can you involve non-technological solutions? really what defines the heart of the mission and what defines who is in, who is out is really the structure of governance. So for me, I don't want to be too bureaucratic, but one way, well, I mean, there are two ways. First, you involve them in the definition of the agenda, and that it must be indeed a policy decision. Try to say, okay, they can define who's going to be around the table. They do not define what's going to be the agenda, but they can say, well, the people who should be around the table should be these people for defining the agenda. So if they are part of the agenda, I believe that their contribution will be, it's a good entry gate for their commitment. And then having them represented in the structure of governance. So that's, again, I'm sorry, that seems a bit bureaucratic, but sometimes you have to start with the procedures and the structures to have a result into action. It should be also within organization. It's interesting to see what is happening in, as you mentioned, we are finalizing now a study on research and technology organizations and how they adapt to sustainability transition. And we see how those big, like Fraunhofer, like the big RTOs, are trying now to also set up some internal challenge framework so that they try to break the silos between different disciplines, and especially the technology and the and the SA or SHS-based type of disciplines, to try to bring for one challenge different teams that include technology and non-technology people. So it's also part of, at the level of organization, that you need to change things so that it happens also.
Okay, so we have 3 minutes left. I have 10 questions left, but I select one from my side. If there is no, it's okay. You mentioned the evaluation of the missions, and let's put it around. I would like to ask about the assessment of the mission also from an ex-ante perspective. Do you have any mechanisms, or does anyone have any mechanisms to conduct an ex-ante assessment of a possible mission, maybe also involving kind of scenarios or any mechanism to look into alternatives and uncertainty?
We haven't found any of that. We are working on it. As I mentioned, we are trying to build this theory of change of missions. That could be a way, and we hope that we can develop that into a tool. It's not, for the moment, it's an analytical framework, but we want to build it as part of the Mission Action Lab that I mentioned at the end. We want to build and develop that as a tool that would support mission. But so far, what we've seen is that many countries, and as we heard yesterday, also engage into the mission thing with not enough work and resources put into the ex-ante and feasibility kind of stage. And we heard yesterday how much that was one of the conclusions during the panel, that you need to put more money before and more money also after. And these are two stages that are usually overlooked. So I fully agree with that. And for missions, that hasn't been done. And given the systemic nature, the uncertainty and all that, that should be even more for mission-oriented policy. You need to take a step back and not dive into actions right away once you have a mission. People usually focus on the mission statement or the mission. They say, okay, the first thing is, let's get a mission statement. Yeah, maybe it's not. That's only a very, very, very little part, and it's not the main thing. Usually they agree. It's not there that the problem is. It's when the funding becomes to be, when you need to allocate the funding, and that you need to think about it upstream, because you need to buy in, you need legitimacy, you need to all this preparatory work, and that we need. So.
Yes, Nelle was pointing on that yesterday too. Okay, so my last question is maybe a bit provocative and not politically correct. When I summarize all you said, is it possible that missions are more easy to implement in top-down countries? Is China the role model for mission-oriented research?
Yesterday, I had a joke with one person, and I said that maybe the right model is enlightened dictatorship. That would be the right. No, I think it's doable, but it will require quite a bit of learning, and it's going to be. These are going to evolve, and again, they are already changing. All those missions, we see now many missions coming to a second stage. second phase, and they are already changing. Again, the high-tech strategy of the future will maybe be different from what the first HES 2025 was. If you look at the top sectors, they have really evolved. So all of these are pretty different.
Good, thank you very much. So I would like to thank you, and I think Philippe deserves an applause from the audience.